A heavy cloud has fallen over the palace. The Golden King is fuming, not with noise, but with a silence that is scarier than thunder. Olori Shadow is on her knees, crying her heart out, but the king says tears cannot wash away the spiritual consequences of her actions. Why is an innocent child being shielded with sacred herbs? What did the king see in the spirit realm that made him act so fast? A short prayer for you. May every negative word spoken against your household backfire, and may your children be shielded from battles they didn't start. Amen. Please note, out of our deep respect for the Yoruba culture, we use fictional names and symbolic terms for certain sacred rituals. As you keep watching, you will understand these names perfectly. The atmosphere in the land of the Golden Crown was so heavy that even the birds in the palace courtyard refused to sing. It was the kind of tension that makes your skin crawl, as if the very walls were watching and waiting for someone to scream. You see, in this life, words are not just air, they are seeds. And when too many people start planting bitter seeds at once, the harvest is always a dark, heavy forest. For weeks, the air around Olori Shadow and her son had been changing. It wasn't just palace gossip anymore. It had become a spiritual weight that was starting to suffocate the peace of the home. The Golden King sat on his throne, but he wasn't looking at the courtiers of the guards. His eyes were fixed on a space that only he could see, his gaze piercing through the physical world into the realm of the ancestors. They call him the only living deity for a reason. He doesn't just hear what you say with your mouth. He hears the heartbeat of your intentions. He had been watching the way people looked at Olori Shadow with side eyes and hushed whispers. He had been listening to the vibration of the marketplace, where bitter words were being hurled towards the palace like stones. Many believed she was the reason for the wahala Queen Naomi faced. And even if she was manipulated by outside forces, the spiritual Lord doesn't care about excuses. Suddenly, the king spoke. His voice didn't shake the rafters, but it made everyone's blood run cold. It was a calm, dangerous vibration, the kind of anger that sits quietly like a lion before it strikes. He summoned his servant with a flick on his wrist and gave a command that made the elders exchange worried looks. Bring the secret herbs, bring the ancient roots, prepare the cleansing elements for the child, now. The palace went freezing cold. A cleansing for a baby who hasn't even learned to speak. The king wasn't doing this for a social media show. He refused to pretend that the noise from the public was just harmless talk. He knew that when thousands of people are angry at a person, their words carry a spirit, and those spirits were now hovering over his son like a dark shadow, waiting for a crack to enter. Olori Shadow felt the strength leave her legs. She didn't wait for a guard to push her. Instinct took over. She collapsed to her knees, her expensive lace dragging in the dust, her head bowed low. The realization hit her like a physical blow to the chest. Her own actions, her own Jagaban attitude had invited a spiritual debt that her innocent son was now being asked to pay. Her body understood the danger before her mind could even find a lie to tell. Do you know what you have done to this child? The king's question landed like a heavy iron weight in the middle of the courtyard. This wasn't private husband and wife talk in the bedroom. This was the king of the land of the Golden Crown holding a mother accountable for the spiritual environment she had created around a royal destiny. Kabiesi, please, I have changed, she wailed, her voice cracking like dry wood. The tears started flowing freely, washing away her composure. These past weeks have been brutal. I have felt the accusations. I have heard the wickedness in the voices of the people. But please, I am begging you, don't let my past mistakes become a bridge for the enemy to cross into my son's life. But the Golden King just looked at her, his expression as still as a stone statue. His mind went back to all the times she had been warned. He remembered the elders who begged her to stop provoking the spirits and the people of the land. Back then, she felt she was untouchable. She thought her position as an Olori gave her a shield that could never break. She had played with the fire of public opinion, and now the smoke was starting to darken the eyes of her innocent child. The servants returned carrying the brass basins and the bundles of freshly crushed leaves. The ritual of restoration was about to begin. The king stood up, his regal robes rustling like the leaves of an ancient forest. He wasn't just a father in this moment, he was a wall of fire. He was stepping in to intercept the poison that Olori Shadow had allowed to linger near the child's cradle.
My Kaunji's family and friends, you need to understand the gravity of this situation. In the land of the Golden Crown, when a king stands up to perform a cleansing himself, it means the case is critical. It means something has been triggered in the spirit that I am sorry cannot fix. As the first drop of the sacred water hit the basin, the king turned to her last time, his eyes flashing with a light that made her tremble. You thought you were powerful, but you forgot that the tongue is a creator. You stood by while poison circled this house because of your pride, and today we see the true cost.
As the servants began to stir the water with these sacred roots, the sound of the liquid splashing against the brass basin seemed to echo like thunder in the silent courtyard. Olorishado remained on her knees, her eyes fixed on the floor, but her mind was racing. She could feel the gaze of every palace guard and servant on her back. They weren't looking at her with the respect she used to demand. They were looking at her with pity and some with a hidden satisfaction. The woman who once walked as if she owned the clouds was now being humbled by the very tradition she thought she could bypass. The Golden King paced slowly around the basin, his footsteps rhythmic and heavy. Every time his real beads clinked, it sounded like a warning bell. He wasn't just doing this for the child's sake, he was doing it to rebalance the scales of the land of the Golden Crown. You see, my crown gist friends and families, in this palace, everything is spiritual. When a mother acts out of order, she opens the door. When she fights battles with pride instead of wisdom, she leaves the gate wide open for anyone and any spirit to walk in. You say you have changed? The king said, his voice dropping to a low, vibrating hum that made the air tremble. But change is not a cloak you put on because the weather has become cold. Change is the death of the person you used to be. Have you truly killed that Jagaban spirit, or are you just hiding it because my anger has finally reached your doorstep? Olorishado sobbed, her hands trembling as she reached out toward the king's feet, but she dared not touch them. Kabiesi, I have seen the light. The past 2 weeks have shown me that I was walking in darkness. The accusations, the way the people speak my name with bitterness, it has broken me. I am no longer that woman who laughed at warnings. I am a mother who is terrified for her son. The king stopped his pacing and looked down at her. It is good that you are terrified. Fear is the beginning of wisdom for those who refuse to listen to counsel. You think the people are just talking? No, they are releasing arrows. Why did she do that? And every she will see is an arrow aimed at his palace. And because the child came through you, you became the target that brought those arrows near his head. He dipped a branch of the sacred leaves into the water and began the first phase of the cleansing. He didn't look at Olorishado as he worked. His focus was entirely on the spiritual protection on his heir. The tension was so thick you could feel it in your bones. The servants moved like shadows, their faces tight, with the knowledge that they were witnessing a moment that would be talked about for generations. They knew that the Golden King was not a man of drama, so for him to come out like this, it meant the spiritual poison had almost touched the child's destiny. People believe you were manipulated, the king said, his voice cutting through the sound of the splashing water. They say you didn't know what you were doing when you stood against Queen Naomi. They say you were a puppet in the hands of those who hate this crown. But tell me, Shadow, does the puppet not enjoy the dance? You allowed yourself to be used because you wanted power. You wanted to be the one everyone feared. And now, look at the fear in your own eyes. The elders of the land of the Golden Crown stood at the edge of the courtyard, nodding in grim agreement. They had warned her. They had told her that the palace is a place of mirrors. Whatever you threw at the walls will eventually bounce back and hit you. Olorishado had thrown stones for a long time, and now the king was trying to catch those stones before they crossed his son. I will wash this child, the king declared, his voice rising in authority. I will scrub the bitterness of your reputation off his skin. I will silence the tongues that are wagging against him because of your stubbornness. But mark my words, if you return to your old ways, no ritual in this land will be enough to save you from the whirlwind you have invited. The sun was beginning to set over the land of the golden crown, casting long, jagged shadows across the palace floor. As the ritual intensified, the smell of the crushed herbs filled the air, a sharp, earthy scent that seemed to wake up the very spirits of the land. The Golden King was now moving with a focus that was terrifying to behold. He wasn't just washing a child, he was fighting a battle in a realm that human eyes cannot see. Every time he dipped the sacred branch into the brass basin, he would whisper words that made the servants tremble. Olori's shadow was still on the ground, but her crying had turned into a soft, broken whimper. The pride that once made her neck stiff had completely vanished. Seeing the king, her husband, the only living deity, having to perform such a heavy task because of her mistakes was a shame deeper than any insult. She realized that while she was busy playing Jagaban and trying to show power, she was actually digging a pit for her own household. "You thought the crown was just gold and beads," the Golden King said, his voice sounding like it was coming from a deep cave. "You forgot that this crown is a covenant. When you behave like a commoner in a royal house, you'd break the protection over your head. You opened the door for the world to see our nakedness. Now the world is looking at our son and seeing your sins instead of his glory." My crown gist friends and families, can you imagine the weight of those words? To be told by the king that you are the reason your child's glory is being dimmed? It is a pain no mother should ever feel. But this is the reality of the palace. Every action has a reaction, and every reaction in the land of the Golden Crown carries a heavy price. The king turned his attention back to the child, his hands moving with a gentleness that contrasted with a fire in his eyes. He was speaking to the boy's destiny, calling back the light that the negative words of the public had tried to blow out. He knew that for weeks people had been saying that Olorishado was guilty of everything, that she was the one who brought confusion to the palace and targeted Queen Naomi. Whether she was manipulated or not, the poison had already been spilled. The elders say that the mouth that speaks evil against a child is like a fire in a dry bush, the king muttered as he performed the final part of the cleansing. I am the rain that will quench that fire today. But the smoke will linger as a reminder to you, Shadow. You will walk through that smoke every day until you truly prove that your heart is clean. One of the senior palace servants stepped forward to assist, but the king waved them back. This was a father's duty. This was a king's burden. He was scrubbing away the wahla that had attached itself to the baby's name. He was removing the stint of the accusations that have been flying all over social media and the streets of Ife. He was making sure that when his son grows up, he won't be carrying the bad luck of a mother who didn't know when to stop. Olorishado looked up, her eyes red and swollen. Kabiesi, I promise, from today I will be the shield and not the sword. I will protect your name and the name of this child with my life. I didn't know the spirits were watching me this closely. I didn't know my words were weapons against my own blood. The king stopped and looked at her. For the first time that day, there was a flicker of something that looked like pity in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by his royal sternness. It is not me you should be promising. It is the ancestors. It is the land. They are the ones who offended with your pride. They are the ones who were waiting at the gates to strike. The tension in the courtyard began to shift. The heaviness was still there, but it felt like a door was finally being closed. The poison was being contained. But as the king poured the remaining water from the basin onto the earth, a strange thing happened. The water didn't just soak into the ground, it bubbled for a second as if it had touched something hot. The bubbling water on the dry earth sent a wave of fresh fear through the courtyard. It was a sign that the poison the Golden King was fighting was not just ordinary palace gossip. It was deep, concentrated bitterness. The king stared at the spot for a long time, his face unreadable. He knew that while he had shielded the child, the air around Olori's shadow was still thick with the consequences of her past. He turned away from the basin, his royal robes sweeping the ground as he faced his wife one last time. "The cleansing is done," he declared, his voice echoing against the stone walls. "But listen to me, Shadow. A child can be washed, but a reputation is like a garment. Once you drag it in the mud, even if you wash it, the fabric is never the same. You have spent months acting like you were above the laws of the land of the Golden Crown. You thought you were the one pulling the strings, not knowing you were the one being pulled." Olori's shadow could only nod, her face wet with tears and dust. She looked like a shadow of her former self. The woman who used to trend for her jagaban attitude and her bold moves was now just a mother clinging to the hope of mercy. The king's words were a heavy reminder that in this palace, your character is your only true protection. Without it, even the tallest walls cannot hide you from the judgment of the people and the spirits. You say you have changed, and for the sake of the blood that flows in that child, I hope it is true. But remember, change is not a speech you give to avoid punishment. Change is a life you live in silence and humility. From this day forward, your footsteps in this palace must be as soft as a cat's. No more provocations, no more pride. If I hear one more whisper of you trying to show power, the gate that opened for this cleaning will be the same gate that closes behind you forever. My crown dish friends and families, this is a lesson for all of us. You cannot play with fire and expect not to smell like smoke. Olori Shadow tried to play a game of power, and in the end, it was her own innocent son who almost paid the price. The Golden King has shown that he is a father first, but he is also a king who will not allow his throne to be stained by the wahala of a stubborn heart. As the king walked back toward his private chambers, the servants began to clear the area in total silence. The drama for the day was over, but the atmosphere remained charged. Everyone knew that a new chapter had begun. A chapter where Olori Shadow would have to prove herself every single day. The palace has a long memory, and the people of the land of the Golden Crown are still watching, waiting to see if this new Shadow is real or just another performance. Before we wrap up the spicy update, I must remind my crown dish friends and families that everything we have discussed here today is based on rumors and alleged information making the rounds on social media. These are trending gists from the digital space and should not be taken as verified facts or the absolute truth. We are here to bring you the gist as it flows in the streets of the internet.